Most people can name the 12 tribes of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin. 12 sons, 12 tribes. The foundational structure of the entire nation of Israel. But here is what almost nobody knows. 2 of those 12 tribes had an Egyptian mother, an African mother, a woman whose bloodline runs so deep into the identity of Israel that you cannot tell the full story of the chosen people without telling her story first. Her name was Asenath, and she has been hiding in plain sight inside Genesis for thousands of years.
Welcome back to Forgotten Tribes and Scrolls. Today we open the scroll on Asenath, one of the least discussed women in all of the patriarchal narratives. A woman who appears briefly in 3 verses of Genesis, and yet whose impact on the story of Israel is permanent, deep, and undeniable. Let's get into it. Genesis chapter 41, verse 45. Pharaoh has just elevated Joseph from prison to the second most powerful position in all of Egypt. He has given Joseph a new name. He has placed his signet ring on Joseph's finger. He has dressed him in fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. And then the text says, he gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, as his wife. 3 things in that verse tell us everything about who Asenath was. First, she was Egyptian, born and raised in Egypt, African by birth and by culture. Second, her father was Potiphera, the priest of On. On was the great sun temple city of ancient Egypt, known to the Greeks as Heliopolis, one of the most sacred religious centers in the entire ancient world. Her father was not a minor local priest. He was a high-ranking religious official in one of Egypt's most important sacred cities. Third, she was given to Joseph by Pharaoh himself. This was not a casual arrangement. This was a royal appointment. Pharaoh was cementing Joseph's place in Egyptian society by connecting him through marriage to one of the most prominent priestly families in the land. Now, here is where we need to slow down and think carefully about what this marriage meant. Joseph is a Hebrew, a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He carries the covenant bloodline of Israel. And God, through the circumstances of his life, has placed him in Egypt and given him an Egyptian wife from a priestly family. This was not an accident. This was not Joseph going rogue and marrying outside the faith against God's will. The text presents it without any note of divine disapproval. No rebuke, no warning, no correction. God orchestrated Joseph's entire journey to Egypt. The pit, the slavery, the false accusation, the prison, the dreams. Every step was divinely arranged. And at the end of that journey, God's man in Egypt has an Egyptian wife, an African woman, connected to the most sacred religious institution in the ancient world. And from that union, 2 sons are born, Manasseh and Ephraim. Genesis chapter 41, verse 50. Before the years of famine came, Joseph had 2 sons born to him by Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. He named the firstborn Manasseh, and the second he named Ephraim. 2 boys, 2 Egyptian Hebrew sons, born of a Hebrew father and an Egyptian mother. And then something extraordinary happens in Genesis chapter 48. Jacob, the patriarch of Israel himself, is dying. Joseph brings his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, to his father's bedside. And Jacob does something that changes the entire structure of Israel forever. He adopts them. He says, Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are mine. He is elevating them to the status of full tribal heads, equal to his own direct sons. These 2 boys, with an Egyptian mother,
are placed at the very foundation of the 12-tribe structure of Israel. Ephraim becomes one of the most significant tribes in all of Israelite history. The name Ephraim is used repeatedly in the prophets to refer to the entire northern kingdom of Israel. Manasseh inherits a vast territory on both sides of the Jordan. Two of the most important tribes in the entire biblical narrative had an African mother.
Now here is something fascinating that most people never encounter. The brief mention of Asenath in Genesis generated centuries of extra-biblical tradition, trying to wrestle with her identity. Some Jewish traditions were uncomfortable with the idea that two of the tribes of Israel had an Egyptian pagan mother. So a tradition developed, recorded in a Jewish text called Joseph and Asenath, written sometime between 100 BC and 200 AD, that Asenath converted to the God of Israel before marrying Joseph. In this tradition, she renounces her Egyptian gods, goes through a period of fasting and mourning, and receives a divine visitation from an angelic figure who transforms her and confirms her place within the covenant people. Whether you receive this as literal history or as theological tradition, it tells you something significant. The presence of an Egyptian woman at the heart of Israel's genealogy was significant enough that generations of Jewish scholars felt they needed to address it. They could not ignore her, because you cannot tell the story of Israel honestly without her.
Step back for a moment and look at the full picture. Joseph marries Asenath, an Egyptian woman from a priestly family. They have Manasseh and Ephraim. Jacob adopts Manasseh and Ephraim as his own sons. They become full tribes of Israel, which means the 12 tribes of Israel, the foundation of the entire nation, include two tribes whose mother was African. But it goes even further, because Ephraim and Manasseh had children. Those children had children. Generations of Israelites carried the bloodline of an Egyptian woman through their veins. When the tribes of Israel multiplied in Egypt over 400 years, the descendants of Ephraim and Manasseh were multiplying too, with African blood in their lineage. The people who crossed the Red Sea, the people who received the law at Sinai, the people who entered the Promised Land. Among them, descendants of Asenath, an Egyptian woman, an African mother, woven permanently and irreversibly into the DNA of the people of God.
Asenath appears in 3 verses of Genesis. She has no recorded words, no recorded prayers, no angelic visitation in the canonical text. And yet, her impact on the story of Israel is as permanent as any patriarch or prophet. 2 of the 12 tribes carry her bloodline. One of those tribes became synonymous with the entire northern kingdom of Israel. The African mother of 2 tribes has been standing quietly in the genealogy of God's people for thousands of years. She was always there. We were just never taught to look for her. If this opens something up for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Forgotten Tribes and Scrolls. Next episode, we go into Phinehas, the Israelite priest whose very name in Egyptian means the Nubian, the dark-skinned one, and what that name tells us about the African presence woven into the very priesthood of Israel. See you there.